All right, now let's bring in a great friend of the program, Deputy Opinion Editor of Newsweek, Batya Ungar-Sargon. Batya, thanks so much for coming on the U.S. Report. Always love having you here. So much is going on here, particularly this bizarre racializing of the presidential election. Please explain to me this. How do Democrats get away with these white dudes and white women Zoom calls?
Thank you so much for having me, James. It's such a great question. They want you to believe that because they are organizing themselves by race, on behalf of a Democrat, on behalf of a leftist cause, therefore it's not racist, which is just obviously nonsense. The whole point of the moral arc of this nation was to move away from people identifying based on skin color and towards people identifying based on content of character. And of course, that's what we have seen on the right. The RNC was incredibly diverse in terms of speaker choices. President Trump is polling at historic levels among racial minorities, just bringing together a robust multiracial, multi-ethnic coalition of working class voters. And then you look over at the Democrats and what are they doing? They're dividing themselves up by race. They're proudly identifying with their racial category. It's disgusting and it's backward. And the gaslighting around it is off the charts. Of course, all of the faux outrage around Donald Trump saying that illegal migrants are stealing Black people's jobs, which they are, is just another attempt to distract from the obsession with race that has taken hold of the Democratic Party as an alibi for nobody talking about the fact that they've abandoned labor.
Well, yeah, and look, I want to put it to you this, put maybe this idea to you, Batya. Is it this thing where they get to say, oh, no, we're the white dudes or the white ladies for Harris, but on the one hand, we're saying, oh, but we're just apologizing for our privilege, but on the other hand, actually what they're doing is really reinforcing their privilege because they're saying, oh, look, without us, you're nowhere.
It's a really good point. I mean, to me, the crime here is, for the whole woke movement, right, which thank God has reached and passed its apex and is now kind of in retreat, you had people saying, look, if you're telling everybody that the most important facet of their personality and identity is their race, pretty soon you're going to have a bunch of white people being like, well, I guess I'm a white person, right? And we all know that we don't want people doing that. And the way we know that is, can you even imagine if there was a white dudes for Trump call, right? They would immediately smear them as white supremacists, right? And yet somehow they want us to think that the racism of obsessing over people's races and categorizing people based on race magically evaporates if you happen to be a Democrat. And of course it doesn't. I mean, we cannot fall for this.
And I mean, so one of the things we've spoken about an awful lot here is the way race is kind of an imperfect substitute for class, or it's a way to cover up the real issues here. You've written a phenomenal piece in Compact magazine on their website all about JD Vance. And you talk about how he has now moved from, the position he was in where he wrote his book, Hillbilly Elegy, to one where he is now in a very different sort of position, and that, in a sense, he's kind of a class traitor for attacking the elite that he fought his way into. Explain a bit more about this, because I thought this was fascinating.
Oh, thank you so much, James. Yeah, the argument I made is this. So my copy of Hillbilly Elegy came out. I have the 2018 soft cover. So it has all of the praise that the book initially garnered in 2016, which means that it is festooned in praise from The Atlantic and The New York Times and The New Yorker and NPR, all of the same outlets that are now calling JD Vance weird, fascist, marginal, all of these insults. So how did this happen? Why did they turn on him? Well, the first obvious answer is, back in 2016, 2018, he was a never Trumper. And you can get away with being quite conservative in America if you're willing to ring that I hate Trump bell, right? It's like that scene in Monty Python where they say, how much do you hate the Romans? And he goes, a lot. And so he goes, right, you're in, right? That was kind of their way in. You could even be pro-life and still be accepted by the liberal mainstream media if you hate Trump, right? And now, of course, JD Vance not only doesn't hate Trump, he supports him, he's running with him. But the real thing that happened was, if you read Hillbilly Elegy, his book that was a wild bestseller, he really does focus a lot on the cultural aspect of the white working class that he came from. And he's a little bit scathing. I mean, he does blame the culture for being defeatist, whereas now he really blames the economy for abandoning those people. An economy, by the way, put in place by Democrats by and large. And so back when he was sort of blaming people for a defeatist attitude and a messed up pathological culture, the right loved him because he was a kind of like bootstrapping, pulled himself out by his, his own endeavors. And the left loved him because the way that he rescued himself from that culture was through the Ivy Leagues, right? And so he he absolved the Democrats of their role in, the destruction of the American working class. Now he's converted to Catholicism. He brings a much more religious approach, a much more forgiving one, based not on the meritocracy, but based on a concept of grace, really, to where he's very clear-eyed now about the role that American, economic domestic policy played in selling out his hometown and those communities. And as such, he's now a class traitor because he clawed his way out through the Ivy Leagues. And now he's sort of turning on that path and saying, no, this is nonsense. These are the same people who destroyed these communities. And because he's a class traitor, they have to make him feel ashamed. They have to attack him in these very, very juvenile ways, calling him weird and so forth. The other thing, James, I don't know if you've noticed this, but, we were told that Donald Trump was the biggest threat to American democracy that you could ever imagine. He's now been downgraded from a threat to democracy to weird. It's so interesting, don't you think? It turns out they didn't actually believe he was a threat to democracy at all, right?
It's as you say, it is just weird. Batya Ungar-Sargon, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time, but we'll have you back real soon here on the U.S.